From blueprints to booming businesses, from groundbreaking to grand openings, this is Beyond the Blueprint. Join host Brad Howard as he takes you behind the scenes of growth and development in Mooresville, Lake Norman, and beyond. We're talking with the decision makers, the planners, the visionaries shaping our communities, giving exclusive insight into what happens before, during, and after projects that define our region. The future is being built right now. Let's go beyond the blueprint.
Good afternoon. Thank you to those tuning in on the radio on 105.9 FM, 100.7 FM, 1400 AM, on social media, on WSSEnews.com, and on demand with the WSSE News app. I'm your host, Brad Howard, and today we are honored to be joined by Ed Broyhill, a North Carolina entrepreneur and political figure and philanthropist. As he currently serves as the North Carolina National Committee Man to the RNC, and is the RNC National Finance Committee Chairman. His grandfather was founder of Broyhill Furniture, and his father was Senator Broyhill. Ed started the first furniture catalog company. He's the founder of the East Coast Hockey League. He was the founder of the first USTA tennis tournament in North Carolina. Is president of the Patriot Foundation, and I think it's fair to say that Ed has transformed the furniture industry. And you and your family have been instrumental and influential in state and federal politics for decades and helped shape so many aspects of our state as we know it today. For those of you who may or may not know Ed Broyhill, who is Ed Broyhill? And let's start out describing some of the pivotal moments of your career path. How did you get here?
Okay, wow. It's a real pleasure to be here, Brad, and honored. Listening to your introduction there, you're very, very good at this. And I was kind of thrown back. I didn't realize, I've heard that you had this radio show, but you've been a prominent figure in this area, and I want to compliment you and your dad and family for all that you've done economically here in this area and the public service that you've pursued. You've done a lot of things, and I appreciate it. Everybody listening, applaud you.
Thank you.
I guess the most important thing in terms of, I can do it once upon a time in my life, but I've been very, very fortunate to have been brought up under a shadow of a family that was entrepreneurial and associated with the founding of a manufacturing company of furniture in Lenore. At one time, at the end of the life of it, when we owned it, we built the company to well over 9,500 employees and a major employer here in Western North Carolina back when the manufacturing industry was so important. And all of that has transformed since then. So I certainly have a history and memory of that transition and during the heyday and the proud spirit we had both in manufacturing in this state, but also a sense of self-reliance and things we did to make ends meet across the state. And then a major part of my life, of course, has been brought up in a political family. And my father, of course, when I was 6 years old, was elected to the U.S. House in 1962. And so we moved to Washington. So I had the privilege of being in the shadow of a lot of events in Washington and North Carolina. And I certainly took advantage of those, riding shotgun with my dad, either campaign events or being at major historical moments. I happen to be there and can reflect on, have a lot of experiences and stories in that regard. My family, as a result of me being raised in such an environment, of course, I was raised not to go back to the company and work, with a guaranteed salary or wage. I was encouraged to start my own business. So I came back to North Carolina, went to Wake Forest University and graduated and got my master's of business there, my MBA at the Wake Forest MBA. Married a girl locally who I'd met in college, and her father was chief of staff of Wake Forest Medical Center, and he was a thoracic surgeon, very prominent. Many of you, especially those that have had a parent or grandparent who ever went to Wake Forest back in the old days, his name was Dr. Timothy Pennell, and he was a major force there, lifesaver at that institution, and a great missionary, Christian missionary all around the world, and supervised the Baptist medical clinics and missions all over the world. And I got to travel with him, so I have a perspective of international missions that I would have not normally had. I started my first company in 1979, and I tried to follow in the footsteps at the age of 24 at something like one of my grandfather or others that might have started something. And just like everybody here, audience listening, and of course, Brad and his dad started their own business. I went through the trials and errors of a poor business model I came up with, and after a year, I decided that I was so desperate that I had to do something different. So I decided to go strictly high-end premium product to sell to luxury market. And so I went strictly into the furniture brand business of selling and delivering furniture. And instead of a $250 sofa, I said, I've got to sell $3,000 sofas. And that, when I made that decision, there wasn't a marketplace in Winston-Salem or for that matter, in the state that people buy expensive furniture like that. See, I had to focus on New York and Dallas and Chicago and L.A.
Is this the business that
that I evolved into?
Okay.
Yeah. And so the first catalog was a small brochure and an ad that I ran in the Washingtonian magazine.
And for a lot of people, there was a world before the internet, right? So,
exactly. And unfortunately, and it's sad to even think now, but in 79 to about 1984 or 1986, there were no computers. They were the concept of an accounting system was a one-write accounting system where you had a carbon between your check and a copy.
I remember that.
And you stuck it in a folder, and you stuck it in your desk drawer. That was your accounting system right there, a one-write accounting system. And so the first year, I think I only did about $500,000 in business, and then when I was bold enough to run that half-page ad in the Washingtonian magazine, I was there at the showroom losing money when I got the first call out of state, and the man wanted 6 bar stools for $6,500, and he wanted to know, and he wanted it delivered. And I asked him, well, how would you like it delivered? He stopped and paused. He said, I thought that was the business you were in. So I actually started selling without even knowledge of even how to deliver.
How to deliver it. You knew how to close the sale.
And I had maybe 1,000 square foot stock room, but within a month I was, selling $500,000 a month because I said I've hit the gold mine. So I started. And, every time you do succeed at a particular activity and you suddenly felt like you found it, that it always brings a set of problems to you that you're not expecting. And so I guess one of the measures of advice that I could give anyone, if you're thinking about starting a business, and I encourage everybody to do so, you need to take a risk in your life, especially when you're young.
Just jump.
And so I do think that once you get engaged and you hit something that's successful, then you need to modify it. You need to change. You need to find a way to get your boat into the current of the river, right in the middle of the fastest rapid. And then you need to adjust, trim, modify, make things run smoothly. So that largely has developed my life from that day to this day. So I've always got challenges, similarly.
Always have challenges and always creative ideas. And we're going to take a break here in 1 second, but I want to get back to the furniture model that you're talking about. And I remember a clip from you on the Oprah show, and we'll dive into that as soon as we get back. So again, Brad Howard with Ed Broyhill on Beyond the Blueprint. We'll be right back. And we're back with Ed Broyhill on Beyond the Blueprint, and we're going to start with a story about when I saw him on the Oprah show, but we're gonna transition back until a story that we were talking with Justin Kazepis at the break. So Ed, I want if you'll tell that story about Appalachian, and I thought that was very interesting. Yeah,
Justin, congratulate him for the success he's got for this broadcast station. It's wonderful. Of course, is an Appalachian State graduate himself and very loyal to the team. And my family's support and background to Appalachian State goes back to 1913, and that's where my grandparents met. My grandfather was born in Boomer, North Carolina, as many people might know, between Wilkesboro and Lenoir on Highway 18 that is sort of right there on the border of the two counties. He grew up on a farm. The Broyhill family traces itself to that area back to 1804, 1805 period. Mm-hmm. Our name was not Broyhill, by the way.
It wasn't.
It was Broghil, Broughial. Broghil. And my ancestor, his name was James Broghil. He was from Northern Virginia, fought at Yorktown, fought at Camden, and he even went into Kentucky looking for Daniel Boone and as a part of a militia that was in Northern Virginia. But for whatever reason, after the war, he actually saw the surrender at Cornwallis and Washington, and he decided instead of going back to Virginia, he headed to the Yadkin River in Wilkesboro, down in an area called Poor's Knob, which is, if you ride down 421 Moravian Falls neighborhood, Poor's Knob is the largest, tallest mountain in the Brushy Mountain. I never have understood the difference between the Brushy Mountains and the Blue Ridge very well. You don't want, if you're a member of the Broyhill family and you're from that area, don't ask that question. They'll look at you stupid, you know. But back to the point, my grandfather grew up in Boomer. Lived on a poor farm. His father operated a sawmill operation, cutting wood down, and so he was brought up in the woods, chopping down trees and helping cut the wood into lumber, and then putting it on the back of a wagon, 2 or 3 mules, take it to Lenoir, take it to Wilkesboro, and sell it at the market. And that was his life.
That was his livelihood. So how did that transition into the furniture business?
Well, he was with his brother. He were the 2 youngest brothers. His oldest brother was 20 years older than him, more or less a father figure. So it was the last 2 of them on the farm, and they had cleared the 30 or 40 acre tract to be ready for planting that next harvest. And a flood came in, which many know in that area there are always some floods. And it wiped out all the work that they had done. He was discouraged at 21, threw his hoe down, and went to his dad and said, "I'm through. And I'm going up to Appalachian to learn how to read and write." So he went up to Boone, walked to Boone, and he enrolled. It was a working high school back then. There were dormitory settings in a working farm. You actually went to school and paid your way by working there, either washing clothes or... No, they had things around Boone that you had to make, work to try to make your way and pay your tuition and board and that type of thing. So at the age of 21, he went into the 7th grade, and that's where he met my grandmother, who was in the 7th grade and 14 years of age.
Wow.
So that doesn't sound good today. But they were very strict and Victorian in that day, so there wasn't a whole lot of romance opportunities, but there was a gentleman there that was the dean of the school, and many will know the name, as Dr. Dean I.G. Greer. It's the last standing building, oldest building on the Appalachian campus. Well, he saw my grandfather trying to get his mules and wagons out of a snowdrift, helped him. They bonded. They became best friends for life.
Wow.
And it was I.G. Greer that convinced my grandfather to set his sights higher than just being a farmer. And so throughout his life, my grandfather emulated all that I.G. Greer stood for. I.G. Greer was an ordained minister. He was active in the state politically and legislatively. His major concern and interest were orphanages and orphans that were rampantly in the post-Civil War period. Apparently that was a huge problem. And in western North Carolina, they didn't have medical facilities. They didn't have churches, so they usually had ministers that would basically go from one village or town to the next, looking for orphanages, ministering to people as a doctor and as a. So he devoted his life to that mission, and he started Broyhill Industries after World War I. He got recruited. Now, this is interesting for your audience to carefully listen to what I'm going to say next, because I'm 71, I've got 3 children and 5 grandchildren, and you just wonder what makes a difference in somebody's life that triggers them to either become something important in life and successful, or somehow or another they fail and live a miserable life and become destitute or whatever horrible thing that might come their way. In his case, he was sick up at Washington, D.C. in a base, getting prepared to be moved over to France to fight in World War I. He fell ill while he was hiking, or they were marching. He was throwing up some blood or expelling blood, and they didn't know what it was. They sent him to Walter Reed.
Wow.
4 days later, his company of 200 or 180 were shipped out, and they were sunk by a submarine in the Atlantic. He was the only survivor.
The only survivor.
Only survivor. And so he was at Walter Reed convalescing, luckily. And while he was there, they didn't have television and radio broadcasting. The Red Cross offered tutorial classes, and they gave the soldiers who were in the hospital an opportunity to multiple choice. What would you like to learn? We're going to have classes starting tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he picked typing as a course, and the second was learning something about photography, how to take using a camera.
Right.
And so he learned how to type, learned about the camera, and when the war was over, he came back to Caldwell County. Mm-hmm. He decided to get a job at a furniture factory, and they asked him, his two brothers were in line with him and were in front of him, and they said they knew about sawmilling and lumber. So they got sent to the lumber yard. Mm-hmm. My grandfather went up in line. They asked him, what did he know what to do? Said he knew how to type. So they sent him to the office. And that made all the difference in the world. I wouldn't be sitting here if he hadn't learned how to type. I'd be up there with my second cousins in Boomer. Right now, probably picking apples or cutting some sort of crop up there, sitting on a tractor all day. But he then took that skill, and then he evolved. And then in 1926, he had enough bravery to start making chairs by hand. He made those little three-pronged benches that your great-grandmother had in front of the fireplace, and he had a blacksmith shop that he rented at the train depot, and he and a woman, just the two of them, she would do the upholstery work, and he would actually put the benches together by hand, put them in a box, and ship them somewhere around the country. And he started from there making chairs, and he was a contract supplier to other dining room companies who were making tables and chests and cabinets, and that made his first year. He made half the income statement. It was $150,000.
Wow.
But he was making chairs for one successful manufacturer, so he had a beautiful marketplace. But then they went from there to actually buying a bankrupt chair factory, and he began the art of figuring out ways of borrowing money and buying factories during the Depression. And so he started from there and built a company that had, I think, in the maximum when our family owned it, it was over 8.5 million square feet with 23 factories and 8,600 employees, and it was a major force. It was like the largest furniture manufacturer in the world at that time. It was amazing.
So the population of Lenoir was
oh gosh, when I was there, it was less than 12 or 15. And I think today it's 21,000. But we had factories in Rutherfordton, Marion. We had Newton. I don't want to miss one. Taylorsville, my friends in Taylorsville, if you're lifted, a lot of upholstery made there. But we were so proud, and still are. And I draw from the heritage and the memories of all of that in that day. And to be and just to put a plug in for my grandfather and both my grandmother, she was the driver of the two. I don't think he would have gotten out of bed without her getting him up.
The motivating force.
Oh, she was unbelievable. And she would send him out to go on a train to go somewhere around the world to go bring home the bacon. And she would tell him, don't come back without it. And there's another story, since your folks are interested, and apparently this is the topic, and I'll go real fast.
Yeah, I know.
But he was broke when he got on a train. He sold life insurance on the side to make a living.
So when he was
and he did
the
bookkeeping
stools,
for other people. During that period, he night lighted, and he had invested $5,000 in this little business. But he won, because he sold so much insurance, he won a round-the-country trip on a train, one way all the way around. So he took the opportunity to sell furniture.
Mm-hmm.
He got to Detroit, went downtown, met a Northerner there who didn't like a Southerner, and he said something to the effect, what can a Southerner show or sell me that would sell in Detroit? And so he walked away discouraged. He threw the designs away. He was going to quit. He took a tour of the Henry Ford factory there and got inspired. He saw how you could make furniture on a mass production basis.
And
he went back the next day to that store, asked for that man, said, what's the best-selling suit of furniture you have here you sell? He took him to the front window. There was a dining room suit sitting there on display.
Mm-hmm.
He said, if I make it exactly like that, at half price, will you buy a carload? And the man said, if you can do that, I'll buy 5 carloads. So he said, can I borrow your suit, your dining room suit? And the man allowed him. Took it back to Lenore, copied it, and that's the birth of Broyhill furniture.
That is an amazing
story. So he was the
no
actual originator of assembly line mass production of furniture in America.
That is an amazing story. I had no idea.
Yeah.
No idea. But no, so we will continue after the break. Again, Brad Howard, Ed Broyhill, Beyond the Blueprint. We'll be right back. And we're back, Beyond the Blueprint with Ed Broyhill, and I'm your host, Brad Howard. And we were talking about how Broyhill Furniture was born, and that was an amazing story. He went, he saw it, and he said, I'm going to figure out how to do this, and took the furniture back. Go from there.
Well, the message, I guess, there is that you don't change. I found that in life, and I've had the privilege of being able to watch others succeed and learn at their as them being a life tutor to me. And one thing that I have determined in life, that if you suffer from pain and anguish, and you don't make a change in life unless you do have pain and you're challenged, where you're coming to the abyss and you're going to fail at something, or if your health is bad, or if you're overweight and you get an issue that you know is going to be life-threatening. That's the only time that people normally make a change. And I'm no different than everybody else is that way.
Right.
And in my grandfather's case, he was going to fail in business. And he was on his last trip. He was up in Detroit alone and facing what he had to face coming home and paying bills or whatever it was. And more than that, he had a extremely powerful wife who was not going to be happy with him coming back without bringing out the bacon.
That's right.
And so he got inspired. He says, here's a different angle. I'm changing my business model. He came back and inspired a few folks that worked with him. And that story would not be complete if I didn't mention the name Clarence Beach. And Clarence was about 10 or 15 years younger than him. He had been hired from a mechanic in like an old gas station, but gas stations back in those days fixed tractors and probably shoot horses too.
Right.
But Clarence was the man behind the scenes that my grandfather would go to and say, you need to get this done at this price and at this time. You got to deliver.
Figure out how to make it.
So Clarence is the one that would draw up the blueprints and come up with an idea. But I worked in the furniture factory myself when I was in college, and it just fascinated me that I'd be in a 1 million square foot operation with 1,200 employees and a mile-long assembly line with a conveyor system that slowly creaked along, and the lumber was outside at one end of the factory. It would come in and go in 10 different directions, and at the end, the furniture was put in a box, and it was my job to stack it somewhere in the warehouse.
Find a place to put it.
But anyway, there was some organization to that madness, but I was always fascinated how things evolve when you're forced to do it, you end up doing it.
Find a way.
So if there's one message anybody leaves today with my broadcast, if you're in pain, If you have a need to change, don't put it off. You do it right now.
Stand and look into the abyss
Exactly.
and say, I'm going to make today a better day.
If you want to be a champion at Little League Baseball, if you want to win an election, if you want to make a difference in your family, you're a city or your town, you've lost your job, you're at the end of wit's end. Sometimes you have to move. Sometimes you have to do something. Sometimes you have to start losing weight, like me. But anyway, that's a good message that I want you all to remember me for.
That is a very, very good point. And I'm glad you transitioned into where I wanted to head next. So we've talked about the family, how everyone got here, how you got here. So let's talk about the business, some of your businesses. We were going to talk about your the episode I saw when you were on Oprah Winfrey or Oprah back in the day. And then I want to transition from that into, growing up and being, you were in some amazing rooms in historical moments. You witnessed things that, we could only dream of. What would have been your most, the impactful moment of history that you witnessed?
Well,
your dad's
I've
career?
got tons of business stories and such. There was my, in those early years since we started out talking about the catalog furniture business, and the company that I had really got large in 1988 through 1992 or 3, and I became a rather national force. I'd sold over 1 million catalogs, so I was having an impact on the consumer marketplace in the country. I wasn't selling all the 1 million people, but I certainly was impacting what they bought and at what price they bought. And I think the business grew up to that period up to over 24 to 35 million, somewhere like that. And you can't imagine the trials and tribulations, even at that smaller level, having to get capital to finance $4 or $5 million worth of invoices that might grow past due, and you got a couple of 100,000 square feet of furniture sitting there that you got to deliver somewhere on a ice floe in Alaska to some huge apartment complex in New York City.
And I think we talked about before, you can't, if they ordered the dining room suit, the bedroom suit, and everything else, you can't just ship one.
Well, that was one of the real challenges I had, because early on, before 1989, the furniture manufacturers used to complete ship. So if you ordered a dining room suit for a particular customer, and it was chairs, a table, a break front, a buffet, and a couple of other things, they would complete ship you.
Right.
So after that period, they decided no longer to give you 2% net 30, which meant you had 30 days to pay your bill, and you were able to take a 2% discount.
Right.
And then you had as late as 60 days, or then you'd be late. Well, they changed everything, and so then it became 15 net 30. And then you didn't get any percentage off. And then they announced in a form letter to us that, and I didn't know the consequences at the time. You never do until problems start occurring. They wouldn't complete ship, so they'd send you the chairs without the table, without the buffet, or without the bench.
So now you needed a warehouse to store everything.
So suddenly your warehouse size increases. But they still want you to pay that friggin' invoice that for the chairs, even though it's not a complete shipment. And then how are you going to get your customer to pay 5 times and be willing to take 5 shipments? So
you have to sit on the cash, the capital.
You got to put the cash up, pay, and so that certainly was a learning experience and a cash flow nightmare for me. I remember one January, I must have been 28 years old, and had my cash flow was off by $4.5 million. And I needed to go get $4.5 million. Now, where in the world are you going to go do that? But there's a will, there's a way.
That's right, growing pains.
But anyway, when I did transition, then I had 2 men that I hired were twice my age. And I brought in outside expertise and this is interesting too, because they didn't have computerization back then until I bit down and took and bought IBM 36's mainframes, and they didn't have. They printed out, thousands of paper just to get one answer. But the beautiful thing
Tell me that wasn't the card that you punch in.
No, well, the problem with an IBM 36 and doing mainframes in that day and time, some of the people are laughing because you remember that era very well. you always end up with 2 or 3 old guys smoking pipes and drinking coffee all day. And those are the only ones that knew how to run the machines, and you had to pay them a fortune. But anyway, that was, having done that, at least for the first time, I had what was called an order processing system that I then knew where everything was in the warehouse, and I knew what every salesman was doing. And if a customer called, I knew the status of their order. And that sent a bright light off to me that the difference between failure and success has to do with the word reliability. If you're known as a reliable person in anything you do, you will always be successful. And so if you always are considering a move to make in business or in civics or in charity or in sports, always be consistent. Always be known as being a reliable person.
They'll always be the one that gets it across the finish line.
Exactly.
Right.
Oh, they can count on you.
Right.
And that was one of the things I was proud of my son. He was a coach's dream because the coach would send him into the football game and say, I need you to do this. And he would do exactly what he was told to do. And, but that's I guess all of us have heard these stories before. And you've got to be willing to take risk, and you've got to be willing to go in a different direction if it's not working. But you can't wait years to make a change. You have to make that change right now, and it'll make your life so much easier.
The entrepreneurial mindset, just it's how you pivot, and it's how you pick yourself up when you fail.
And it's harder in this day and time because I think 2 or 3 generations have gone by where they have learned not to take risk. And that's a problem we're dealing with politically in this day and time.
And that is a great transition. So we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back in the final segment, and we will be discussing politics. So something near and dear to your heart. We'll be right back. And we're back on Beyond the Blueprint with Ed Broyhill. We've been talking about the impact that Ed and his family have had on North Carolina business and philanthropy and politics over the years. I want to jump into more on the politics side in this last segment because not only is he had the opportunity to be witness to a lot of political history that's happened in D.C. and around the state. Ed has also been in politics, ran for Congress, is national committee man. What do you see as the most impactful moment in your life in the political circle?
Well, that's a big one.
A lot of
I think of all of us. I think our point of reference is always the years that you have those experiences, and so if someone thinks back, my political life started, I guess, in 1962 to this day. Dad served in office from 62 to 1986, ending his career as a U.S. Senator. He had a particular kind of personality and strengths, and he had his weaknesses. Dad was never one that formulated a public appearance where he was really outstanding at the podium and making a speech. He was not the kind of a passionate speaker that some people that you see on TV who might be a senator or those like, even for that matter, Donald Trump, who's bombastic in his approach and gets up fairly unprepared when he speaks. And he's got his game much more tightened, but you have to have, and I learned this early. My father would teach me this. He would say, you either have to have something special in the sound of your name or in terms of your appearance, or you have to be able to focus in on 1 or 2 issues that you're known for. You can't be everything to everybody. And in the 62, 60s period, it was funny. When I was young, I'd walk with Dad throughout the Capitol and meet congressmen all the time. And they either wore a hat that looked funny, or they'd wear a rose on their lapel, or they had an unusual name like Tip O'Neill, or they all had football sounding names like Dan Roustenkowski, or something like that. And I'll be honest with you, given my experiences, and I can tell you what, I knew more about the Congress when I was 8 years old or 9 years old than anybody, and knew the personalities. Unfortunately, we elect a lot of people that don't have the skill sets to withstand the level of activity and what's required of you to be a representative up there, because the issues are so widespread, complex. You're being pulled from every direction. You don't know who necessarily to trust. You're usually on a committee or subcommittee you despise. You have enemies on the other side that oppose everything that you're doing. And like school, you got to go there every day to every class. Dad sat beside John Dingell, who served for 40 years, congressman from Detroit, the two of them together for 26 years. Yeah, it'd be like going to elementary school with the same guy.
Seatmate for 26 years.
6 years. And he looks at you and says, I disagree with everything you say. And you're sitting there trying to do a deal with him, or you're trying to slow the legislation down or oppose anything he's doing. Now, that's a hard to think about that, and you have to go to work every day and deal with that.
An interesting way to accomplish it. But what on that note, what was in your opinion, the biggest difference the way politics were then versus now? Now it seems so polarizing. Back then,
well, and the reason for that is that there are a number of reasons why we have polarized politics in this day and time. Back, I guess it was during the Jimmy Carter days, there was driving need for after civil rights and all the issues and the horrible adversarial nature of the civil rights issue for going on for now hundreds of years. But there was a point in time where everybody said, well, we've got to make sure that we have minority representation.
Okay.
And of course, my dad was in favor of everybody's in favor of that. Anybody that is in the greatest need needs to have the greatest representation. But when you go about restricting or creating rules that are gerrymandering and redistricting full districts so that you can accommodate a number of minority districts that are guaranteed minority, what happens is on the other side, you pop out something that is extraordinarily right-wing and conservative. You cannot modify for some purpose, for social gain, without disturbing the other side, so it becomes extremist. And I'm not expressing myself very well here, but anytime you start tampering with a fair apportionment by trying to guarantee one or two districts in one direction, you're going to pop out a proportionally extreme on the other side. And so when you get to Washington, then you're going to have an environment where you're going to have real strong opinions about how things should go. So
it just seems that when you get to on the federal level, and you're more involved in state and federal politics in that world, it just seems that there's more polarization the further you get to the president. I mean, the further you get to on the federal level, and the local side is typically nonpartisan. The cities. I'm talking about municipalities and everything else.
Well, the other thing I've always learned is that politics is always local too. So I don't have a real answer regarding how you're able to resolve the issues of extremism in our country. And the other point needs to be made that you've got to remember in the history of the United States, going to even go back to the Civil War and before and such, you've got to have had a lot of extremism back in that day because you had neighbors that were willing to arm themselves and kill you during the Civil War period. And people who know your history can go back to Andrew Jackson, to other, Theodore Roosevelt and such, and you can see some. And our country has gone through periods where it's required change, and maybe this is some sort of consistent thread that if you look back at some of the points I made about business, when you transition, you end up going through pain and convulsions to know how to change. And so when the change is made, everything goes back to normal, and another 5 or 10 years, you're back at it again. So, but I'm the RNC committee man from North Carolina. I decided I was going to take them up on running for that position because my grandfather, J.E. Broyhill, who I'm his namesake, he was the national committee man from 1948 to 1976.
I did not know that either.
And he was, back in those days, party politics had nothing to do with primaries. The decision of who your presidential candidate was in smoke-filled rooms in 100-degree weather at some convention somewhere with thousands of people there fighting. But my grandfather loved, there were two things in his life he loved: Republican Party and the Baptist Church. Those were very important to him. And coming from Wilkes County, as people know historically, that was the only county that was Republican for 100 years. And half the people there fought on the northern side. I mean, there were even to this day, there's still, the people that are listening to this broadcast will laugh. It's still got that adversarial nature and rebellious nature in Wilkes County. But anyway, the RNC is the actual governing body over the entire Republican Party. And then every 4 years, it is basically the organization and campaign arm of the president who's been nominated and elected to be as a part of the primary system. So it actually, everything is then devoted to electing a president during that 4-year period. If you look at the RNC and you get aggravated at Republicans, let me point out to you right now, Republican leadership at the national level has nothing to do with issues. I mean, a lot of people have a strong point of view about, and the person that heard me say that doesn't like hearing that.
Right.
It's just the truth. Because you represent all Republicans, whether you're a liberal or conservative or whether they believe in this or believe in that. Your job is to create an opportunity for everyone under an umbrella to figure out how to get elected. So one thing I've noticed is that when I joined as elected at RNC, I said, "What's my job description?" They didn't tell me what my job description was. No one knows.
You had to figure it out.
Yeah, I just couldn't understand. And so I'm a fundraiser, so I said, well, I'm going to devote my efforts to that area. And I think I'm the only one among all of the officers that actually is involved in fundraising who is actually a part of the party.
Right.
Most people that are a part of the party, they consider themselves grassroots.
Right.
And I'm saying, well, what does grassroots mean?
Right.
Other than organizing a Lincoln Day dinner.
Right.
And to me,
knocking doors.
Getting
out there.
I think the key to it is you've got to be
involved.
First thing you do is focus on registration in your county. So I think you have to focus on being a Republican means you have to focus on registering people to vote,
getting them registered to vote,
and getting active and get them engaged. And then the next step is to recruit quality candidates. And we don't do a very good job of that because we don't put Republicans up for office as much as we should. The third is generating volunteers, not for the party, but for the candidates that are run.
To go knock
and then
doors.
The fourth thing is raising money to give them resources to win. So today, that's the big rub. That's what I'm a champion of. That's what I raise money for. And I'm a big stalwart, and now I'm a national leader, and I'm making a difference in who becomes president these days, and it's really amazing to me.
So we have 30 seconds here remaining on the show. Going forward-looking, you see a window that the rest of us don't see on the RNC side. What do you see in politics? Biggest changes, biggest impacts coming up? I know there's a local seat here for North Carolina.
Yeah,
about.
Everybody has got conjecture as to who may run for the U.S. Senate.
Right.
And I know for one that I'm supporting Laura Trump. I just hope and pray that she decides to run. I just want to see that battle. It would be interesting. And I'm sure Roy Cooper is going to be the other candidate. They're already gearing up for it. And for the listeners that listen to us, to show you how big this battle is going to be, I bet you the Democrats are going to put up probably 80% of it dark money from somewhere in Switzerland or somewhere around the world. No telling where their money comes from.
Right.
And I'm just kidding. I just want you to know that's always a part of the joke we all play, but it is true. We don't have much control over where the money comes from.
Right.
They're going to spend over $250 million against whoever we put up, and we're going to have to raise $100 million. And you've got to think in terms of a candidate that can raise that kind of money. And who other than Laura Trump can do that?
$100 million.
Not a freshman congressman. Somebody that is new to the game,
Right.
doesn't have the name recognition. And I know Laura Trump can turn to her father-in-law and say, Dad, you're going to come to Caldwell County and knock on doors with me and serve McDonald's fries and Hickory. If she can get that kind of attention, then we won't have as big a problem.
Right. And
so,
and,
but before I leave, I want to say everyone that's listening here today, you all are very blessed with your representation, Democrat and Republican alike. Our state of North Carolina has a quality of life much greater than every other state in the country. We're very, very blessed. I'm very honored to be a part of this show and a friend of Brad Howard.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And thank you, Ed. I really appreciate you being on the show and being a friend. And would love to have a follow-up in a few months and just see how everything's turning out.
Definitely.
But again, thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll see everyone next Friday at 3 p.m. It's Brad Howard, Beyond the Blueprint. Have a great week.